Welcome to this video, everyone, and in this video I will be giving my thoughts and review on Marvel's The Avengers, a new Avengers game made by Square Enix. Now, it's tough to see if there's any super anticipation for this game, just because when images first got released last year, it got kind of a mixed reception, but still, it's an Avengers game, and we know what sort of a hot commodity that's been over the past decade, and I was still going to get it, just because to get an Avengers game in this new next-gen style, when we've had these great superhero games over the past decade on next-gen systems, I definitely wanted to see what kind of game this was going to be. Now, this game takes place in its own universe, unrelated to the movies or the comics or anything like that. It tells its own original narrative in a story where the Avengers are hailed as these heroes and being celebrated, and we follow the story of a young girl named Kamala Khan. And for people who don't know, this is one of the versions of Miss Marvel out there. This takes place before she gets her powers. One day there's an event that takes place and the Avengers are blamed for it because some bad shit goes down. They're blamed, they're disbanded, and Kamala Khan after this rises up, realizes her own powers, and gets the Avengers back together as they face a new rising threat named the MODOK. Now, over the past decade, we've really been spoiled when it comes to superhero games elevating to that next level. Two franchises stand out, obviously. When it comes to the Batman Arkham trilogy, and yes, I did say trilogy, this was a revolutionary video game series where we saw video games just taken to that next level when it came to detail, story, content. Everything about that series was just amazing, even if Arkham Knight didn't quite live up to those first two games, but it still had a ton of content that made it worth playing. Then you come to a couple of years ago when it came to Marvel's Spider-Man, made by Insomniac. That was an incredible game that just gave us a fully realized Spider-Man experience when it came to the gameplay, when it came to the story, how detailed the city was, the post-game content. Everything about that game was just phenomenal. It was my favorite game that year. That's why Avengers, this game made by Square Enix, had a ton to live up to when it came to what the Batman Arkham games brought and Insomniac Spider-Man, just because we've seen superhero games being taken up to that next level. And this game had a whole lot to live up to when it came to what those games established. Unfortunately, this game fell short in almost every aspect you can imagine. When it came to the game's main story campaign, I found it to be very up and down. You start off controlling Kamala Khan and really using her, but after that, the game is structured into segments where you get one mission with one Avenger, then it breaks off to another story mission with another Avenger, and that kind of thing. And that's fine. And what was cool is that I actually thought the intro sections to where you're using these different Avengers was really cool. Like your introduction segment when you're using Tony Stark and getting his armor together. I thought that segment was actually pretty clever. And the stuff where you use Black Widow, that was a nice pleasant surprise how that mission was structured. And your introduction to using Thor and his main mission story segment, that was really cool also when it came to how clever these missions are, and they were different from the main campaign. Unfortunately, a lot of the missions in the regular campaign just feel really repetitive. You know, it's just either going to the same canyon site, the same AIM indoor facility, to where it just got really repetitive. And speaking about that scenery, that's something that made the game very boring for me, just because the scenery, there's just very little differences when it comes to the visual variety in this game. You're going to a lot of missions which are in the same place, where you're getting the same scenery, same enemies, same kind of structure when it comes to level design, and it was just nothing really clever about it. It made the game very visually boring to me. And it's tough because obviously this isn't a game that takes place in the city like the Batman games or the Spider-Man games, so you can't really add that full level of detail to stuff like that, but still you would expect a little bit more visual polish, just because the areas just don't look anywhere near as good as it did in those games that I just mentioned. What helps the campaign, though, is that the gameplay actually is kind of fun when it comes to controlling the characters. They give each Avenger their own fully realized skill set, and you really get to do all the things you would really want to do in controlling these Avengers. When it comes to Iron Man, you get the full arsenal when it comes to using missiles, repulsors, lasers, flying around as him. That's cool stuff. Black Widow's combat, you get to use her guns, you get to use her batons, that kind of stuff. It's really cool. Obviously, Hulk is smash, and you get good skill set when it comes to using different abilities and all the different stuff you would want. So that stuff was really cool how they did it. Unfortunately, what hurts the gameplay, even though it you get good character gameplay, is that the game design really hurts it, just because every single level is really the same thing, where you're getting these different generic robot enemies or just snipers with guns, and it just evolves into the same heavy group combat system where you're just sort of heavy hitting a bunch of like grouped enemies together. And there's, like I said, there's no variety when it comes to sort of how the missions are structured. Every single mission you're going to see them just sort of ganging up on groups of enemies with little thought and sort of what character you're using. And when it comes to that sort of gameplay style, it really doesn't ultimately matter what character you're using. Some missions are better just because you do have characters that can fly like Iron Man and Thor, and they're more appropriate for those missions. But most missions, it really doesn't make a difference whether you're using Black Widow or you're using Hulk. It's really just that same sort of like use your fullest abilities to sort of smash all the enemies together. And in that aspect, it was kind of disappointing just because you wanted to see these different Avengers skill sets be used to their full potential and not have sort of gameplay segments where you're just using the same, where it doesn't matter what character you're using, you're just going to end up getting the same sort of hack and slash button mashing game result. Also, the actual story within the main campaign isn't all that good. You slowly see the build-up and evolution of the MODOK as you're going through these different missions with these Avengers, but ultimately, it's just not a very rewarding or very well-told story campaign that shouldn't take you more than a few hours to do. There are some cool segments, like there's a really cool space mission that has like a really cool, like a WoW kind of twist in the middle. But like I said, besides a few missions here and there with different Avengers, nothing all that rewarding when it comes to storytelling or campaign progress. Probably the biggest offender to me and the thing that pissed me off the most while I was playing this game is how tedious it is to get costumes and other unlockables in this game. Any costume that you do not unlock just through regular story process is extremely tedious and more trouble than it's worth to get in this game. To even get the regular iconic costumes that you see the characters wear on the damn cover is a very long, very tedious process to where you think you're progressing and getting the costume, and then it'll tell you, hey, go ahead and block 10,000 more tags. To where after a while, I just said, you know what, fuck it, this ain't even worth it. Especially when this main story campaign isn't all that good as it is. Once you're done with sort of the main story campaign is where you get the post-game content. And this is a series of a bunch of missions that are a continuation of the main story, where you can go in either solo or use multiplayer to use a team of Avengers to go on these different missions, unlock more stuff, and blah blah blah. The problem I had with this was the same problem I had for a lot of the missions during the regular campaign, is that it's just so goddamn repetitive. You see the same goddamn scenery, the same buildings, same hallways, over and over and over again, and no amount of enemies they throw at you can sort of differentiate between this different stuff, because even within these missions you're doing the same thing, like protecting computer terminals, destroying sort of energy generators. It's the same goddamn thing over and over again, to where it's just like, man, there was just no variety or thought when it came to sort of making this game different. When it came to missions, when it came to structures, nothing, to where even the end game content, post game content, even if you have the multiplayer option, still not worth it, just because the missions are just incredibly easy and just not much thought went into them. Adding all this game's issues together when it came to the campaign, the story, the structure, the level design, I greatly disliked this game and just was not a fan. Like I said, we've seen some great superhero games when it comes to Marvel Spider-Man and the Rocksteady's Batman Arkham games, but this game made by Square Enix just did not fit the bill and just did not live up to those standards, to where I gotta give this like a 4.5 out of 10. I just didn't think this was all that worth it. There is some fun to be had, like I said, flying around as Iron Man, the way they sort of realize each character's skill sets, good stuff when it came to that. But overall, just like with the basic things you need for a game, like good level design and just like a good story and just other stuff that I want to see, this game sadly just did not have it. So yeah, this was definitely not worth watching. But people will still buy it just because it's got that Avengers name and it does generally look good. But nah, this game just doesn't live up to things. If you want sort of a real good superhero experience for this year, wait till Spider-Man Miles Morales comes out for the PS5 later this year. So that'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, thank you for watching.